everybody. My name is Patrick Harris. I am a sales guy over here at Western Title. We are a title and escrow company here in the state of Nevada. We've got 9 different offices, 2 down in Vegas and 7 up here in northwest Nevada. So we're happy to have all you guys here today. We love to have a bunch of different education topics and hot topics. And with the pandemic going on right now, we've had to kind of re-strategize. Instead of hosting you guys here and having live Q&A sessions, we've kind of adapted to have these webinars where we're able to get the whole entire crew together. Our topic today, of course, is regional transportation. So we've got some folks from RTC as well as NDOT to come here and actually talk to you guys about how projects are formed, how your guys' voice can be heard in those projects, and also some of the projects that you guys have been seeing both on the streets right now and also to come. So just a couple ground rules before we get going. Everybody is on mute right now, except for our speakers, as well as your videos are turned off. If you have any questions whatsoever as the presentation goes along, please utilize the chat. We're going to have about 10-15 minutes at the end of the presentation where we'll address any questions that have come up, and we'll also invite you guys to go off mute as well to actually ask some questions and get some more feedback from our representatives. So remember, if you have any questions, just go ahead and put them in the chat. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. We have 3 speakers today, so I'll do a quick introduction for them. First off, we have Meg Raganese, who is our NDOT Public Information Officer with the Nevada Department of Transportation. For 15 years, Meg has updated the media and public on NDOT's Northern Nevada highway programs and projects. She keeps the public updated through press releases on NDOT's nevada.com, so nevadadot.com, and through social media. Meg previously worked in casino marketing. So thank you for coming today, Meg. I appreciate it.
Hello, everyone. Thank you.
We also have Mark Costa. He is NDOT's Multimodal Program Development Chief. Mark is, he oversees the statewide transportation improvement program, long-range planning, freight plan, corridor plan, bike and pedestrian program, rural transit, rural aviation, state planning and research program, metropolitan planning, organizational liaison, rural county and tribal liaison, and miscellaneous federal planning grants. And I need to take a big breath. He has been with the state of Nevada for over 22 years, as you could probably tell from all of his responsibilities, and with NDOT for over 4. His previous transportation experience includes U.S. Army highways, truck and waterborne operations. And last but not least, our representative from RTC is Dan Dunges. He joined RTC in 2016. He currently holds the title of planning manager. He has nearly 20 years of experience in transportation planning in both the public and private sectors. He's worked for metropolitan planning organizations with urbanized area populations ranging from 1,000 to approximately 10 million. At RTC, for the development of federal requirement planning program and oversees performance management, safety, and technical programs. Dan also works with staff in the planning department to deliver corridor and planning studies, assuring a smooth transition into project development and implementation. So we've got some real good experts here for us. Meg, I think you're speaking first on NDOT's side, so I'll turn it over to you and take it away.
Thanks so much, Patrick, and thanks for everyone for being here. You know, I think we all wouldn't be here if this weren't such an important topic, how our regional transportation system connects us, how the decisions are made for not only those mobility connections, but you know, economic development as well. So there's really a lot of nexus there that I think a lot of us are interested in. So without further ado, I'd like to do is just start in our presentation. And what we're going to cover, as Patrick mentioned, is first and foremost, I kind of want to set the stage for NDOT and what we as an agency do. Mark Costa will talk about some of our planning efforts so that every one of you can kind of understand a little more about how our transportation improvements are collaboratively planned, and that includes collaboratively planned with the RTC. So I'm really glad that Dan's here, and he'll really talk about their planning, their more regional planning processes, as well as how that dovetails with our NDOT statewide processes. So let me share my screen for everyone, and we will start the presentation. Okay, so just as I said, to set the stage. We at NDOT, as the statewide Department of Transportation, we plan, build, maintain, and operate more than well over 5,000 miles of state roads, and that's more than 14,000 lane miles. Lane miles is just like it sounds. That's when you think of miles, that's the regular miles that we think of. 1 mile, 5 miles between destinations. The lane miles is the cumulative mileage when you include every lane within an interstate, for example. So that's the difference that you see there. It's key to know that what we as NDOT maintain are our freeway and interstate systems, not the local roads. So that's obviously I-580, I-80, 395, even some major arterials such as McCarran in Reno. So that's what we maintain. The local cities and counties are responsible for some of the more local roads with, of course, oversight from the RTC, which Dan will talk about as well. And across the state, there are more than 1,000 state-maintained bridges, and cumulatively, as you can see, more than 27 billion, with a B, miles were traveled on our roads in 2018. So that's obviously, quite a responsibility, one that we take very seriously. And in fact, when you look at that interstate and freeway network that I talked about compared with the local road network, we as an agency, as the Nevada Department of Transportation, we maintain and own and operate about 15% of the roads in Nevada, but those roads actually account for nearly 75% of the truck traffic that goes across our state. So once again, a really important nexus with economic development as we work collaboratively with our partners in that realm. And this graph here I wanted to show you, not so that you have to look at every single one of those numbers, but just so that you can see that trend line of how the number of vehicle miles traveled, which is just like it sounds, is purely the number of miles traveled by every vehicle on our roads in a year, how that has increased year over year. This particular graph starting from 1993 going to 2018. And so as you can see, that VMT, or vehicle miles traveled, increases almost every single year. But unfortunately, what we have to get creative with is the fact that one of our primary funding mechanisms for our statewide system, which is the federal and state gasoline tax, those taxes actually have been the same since the early 90s. So as you can see, the number of vehicles traveling has, the amount of funding that we get from gas tax as a statewide agency, it's a little different for the RTC of Washoe, and Dan will probably touch on that, but as a statewide agency, hasn't changed since the early 90s. And just as another example to kind of put this graph in perspective, in a recent 10-year period, specifically between 2008 and 2018, the vehicle miles traveled increased 30%, and in the next 10 years, we anticipate that they'll increase another 30%. So really what's the most important takeaway I would say from this is the important balance that we collaboratively, not just NDOT, but our partners as well, work in balancing pavement preservation, preserving our existing pavement through repaving and other programs, as well as allowing for new capacity for all the additional miles that are traveled on our roads, all of the new community members that are coming into our Nevada communities on a yearly basis. So that is why our planning processes are so important. And with that, I'll go into Mark Costa so that he can kind of give you an overview of some of our major planning efforts that really help keep that balance into account.
Okay, thank you, Meg. I wanted to go ahead and begin by giving a brief introduction of what I'm talking about here. We are truly in the middle of a transportation revolution right now in Nevada. We have continuing rapid population growth, new technologies involved, inconsistent revenue sources, as Meg was talking about, aging infrastructure, environmental concerns. These are just a few of the challenges that we're dealing with now, and that we have to really change the way that we've done transportation. We have to go in and adapt for the future for that. The presentation I'm going to go ahead and share with you is a very quick overview of several major planning endeavors. Each of these planning events could easily occupy an hour just by itself, but we're only going to go ahead and focus in on the highlights today. There are additional planning events, studies NDOT is developing, which we're not covering today, but which are still out there nevertheless. You have up on your screen there the One Nevada Plan. Want to go ahead and include a brief definition of what that is. This is the state's long-range transportation plan. It is a federal requirement to have one of these done every 5 years. We are currently involved with that. As you can see, we first published it in 2018. We'll be revising that or making a new plan altogether by 2023. One thing I want to focus on, a couple of things I want to focus on this plan. One is that we did have extensive collaboration on this, and NDOT did not do this in a room by itself. We had several periods of public involvement. We were in Reno, for example, and in Sparks several times conducting public input for those. And one of the things that came out of the plan is that we came up with 6 goals, how we want to go ahead and evaluate projects and needs based on these goals. They're enhance safety, preserve infrastructure, optimize mobility, transform our economies, foster sustainability, and connect communities. Some of these we're used to doing, like, for example, enhancing safety and preserving infrastructure. Some are really new. My favorite new one is foster sustainability, and that means several things. There are several things involved with sustainability. There's environmental considerations, for example, which is receiving a lot of attention because of the greenhouse gas reduction initiative that we're involved with, but it also includes funding, financing for that, and cultural affairs, making sure that we maintain our cultural flavor of our state. So that's an example of how we're trying to go ahead and implement planning for the state of Nevada in partnership with the rest of the state. Again, it's not NDOT's One Nevada Plan, it's still a plan for the entire state. This plan provides a common foundation and shared policy framework for making more informed, transparent, so everybody knows what we're doing and why we're doing it, and responsive transportation investment decisions for that. Want to go ahead and focus in on the current phase. What are we doing to implement this plan right now? And what we are doing is the state transportation plan prioritization, which is the next slide there that Meg put up there. This is an iterative process. We've had a lot of work involved with this because remember, we had those 6 different goals that I talked about on the previous slide that we're trying to get implemented, get represented here, see if our projects meet that, and then evaluate or prioritize projects on what we're going to go ahead and accomplish. As a starting point here, you can see that we had various small tests involved with this, involving subject matter experts on the projects and on the needs that we have. And what has come out of this is that we have a prioritized STIP, or Statewide Transportation Improvement Plan, for 2021, beginning next federal fiscal year, which is already October 1st, just a few months away. And that STIP is out there for public review right now and public comment that you can go ahead and submit comments on. It's on the NDOT website. If you get to the NDOT website and look for the projects, the STIP will be there for you to go ahead and comment on. And we're accepting comments from that all the way through the end of this month, through July. So, and then we're going to go ahead and give you some examples of some projects and studies that we have involved in. We want to talk about probably something that's near to you and to your client's heart is the Inter-County and Regional Transportation Plan for the TRIC Center, Tahoe Reno Industrial Center. You see there a map showing how this affects several different counties for that, Washoe being one of them, Carson, certainly Churchill. And the TRIC area is very big. You can see looking at the graphic there where the traffic comes from by percentages for that. And it has been with a big economic improvement in that area. We've seen a huge increase in traffic. So what we were trying to do with that study is figure out what can be done right now. What can we do to improve it? And because to widen the road, even if that is a good solution, would take money, a lot of money to do that, and time to do that. Building a railroad out there would take a lot of time. But meanwhile, people are stuck in traffic, spending a lot of time just waiting for their cars to move. And of course, there's a big increase in noxious gases from all those car engines and truck engines idling for that. So we conducted a two-phase study on that. You can see on the graphic here, it hit some of the highlights for that. Again, there was a lot of stakeholder involved with that. Stakeholders being that have a vested interest in this area, including private businesses and private people who are trying to get to and from work. We had over 1,100 people respond to a survey that we conducted. 65% of them drove alone, but 15% carpooled. And though the traffic is still pretty heavy on that, that's a success. And RTC Washoe has a lot of credit with that, because some of their rideshare programs have certainly helped. A lot of employers in the Trick Center have also stepped up in terms of setting up their own carpools for that. Usually in most areas, in many cases, people carpooling or ride sharing is only like 2 or 3%. So we've already had a lot of improvement in that area. That's gone well, but we want to figure out how we can make it better quickly. And one of the things we're trying to establish is a Transportation Management Association, a TMA involving both public and private entities in that, figuring out how we would go ahead and get people to and from work, because actually getting people to Tahoe, Reno Industrial Center, just getting them there is only really half the battle. As you can see, that's a pretty big area, and there's a lot of businesses in there. So if they just get there, then they have to go ahead and get to their place of employment for that. So that's a challenge. I'll admit that the TMA has not started off as quickly as we would like to that. We're thinking part of that may be due to the COVID-19 crisis that's currently ongoing for that. We had good participation during the stakeholder meetings, but not so much. We're trying to form this TMA and relying on the TMA to go ahead and develop solutions and implement solutions to go ahead and help with that. So we're hoping that that can pick up in the succeeding months. I have another example here that I want to talk to you about. And again, that's something you've heard a lot about, is the future Interstate 11. Okay. Some information about Interstate 11 is that this is federally directed or federally talked about from the FAST Act. And this is originally supposed to be a freeway that goes all the way from Mexico through the United States up to Canada for that. And we started building that. You may have heard that there's already an I-11 in existence in Arizona and in southern Nevada. What we were going ahead and taking a look at is how to extend that from the Las Vegas area up to Interstate 80. And we conducted a study on that. It was further refined through previous studies that it would go ahead and proceed along the 95 or western side of the state, US 95 and western part of the state for that. And again, we had 2 separate periods of public outreach where we accepted public comment. Reno or Washoe County was also included in that. And we've evaluated that against 9 different criteria, 9 different categories. It's kind of small on your screen there, but you can see those wheels there were the routes that were selected. A1 shows the relative scoring for the route from Las Vegas up to Tonopah. And that follows pretty closely US 95, but not entirely. We've had to go ahead and deviate from that route, particularly around bypassing cities that are located there, because we don't want to have to go downtown, middle of a town for I-11. So we're probably going to have to go ahead and move around the city, build a deep detour or bypass for that. This is going to be done incrementally because we don't have an I-11 funding source for that. This is going to be a series of individual projects to go ahead and get that completed. And it'll go through the One Nevada prioritization process. I just talked about a couple of slides ago for that. So that's going to be included as part of that. And then moving past Tonopah and going up to I-80, we had 5 different courses of action that we were looking at. And the two there, B2 and B3, were the 2 finalists. These are the ones selected for additional study. And as you can see, they generally follow US 95 or US 95 alternate. They go near the Fallon Naval Air Station. We were concerned about our I-11 project because there's a federal lands bill currently being worked on in Washington, D.C. And as you know, both the Navy and the Air Force have submitted proposals to expand their respective bases in Nevada. So we wanted to go ahead and make sure that we had our claims, for lack of a better word, posted out there so that the Navy and the Air Force were aware of what we did. We did have meetings with the Navy and the Air Force explaining clearly what we were doing. And I think we have an understanding that whatever route is chosen for Northern Nevada, we can go ahead and meet that. There may be, particularly if B2 is chosen, I'm thinking because the Navy does have training outside of the Fallon area. They train in Navy SEALs, for example, in a training area that's to the west of B2 called Bravo 16. And so we have to go ahead and make sure that there's a way for the Navy to convoy over to the training area while the traffic on I-11 is not interrupted. So this is future, it's down the road a ways, but you'll see various improvements made over the years to this route as we have funding and as individual projects along those routes are prioritized according to the One Nevada system for that. So it'll be incrementally, not all at one time, but you'll definitely be seeing action taken along those areas. And so I think that's my last slide.
Thank
So
you,
back
Mark.
to you, Meg.
Thanks, Mark. So talking about preparing for the future with all that Mark went over and the incremental improvements, I want to talk now and provide some insight on the more immediate improvements that we'll be making and some of the road construction projects that we have started or coming up across our community. The first, I'm sure that you've all heard about, is our Reno-Spaghetti Bowl improvements. And so a little bit of background, many of you have been in the community for a while, you know this, but the Spaghetti Bowl itself was first constructed in the late 60s and early 1970s. Since that time, our community's population is 4 times what it was at that point. So it obviously requires a larger spaghetti bowl, a larger interstate system through the metro area to really sustain and keep our community going, both from a mobility perspective, but also from an economic development perspective. So when we talk about what will be our Spaghetti Bowl project, it's actually kind of a misnomer because it's multiple projects that'll actually span beyond the Spaghetti Bowl itself. So as you can see in this slide, we're talking about 5 different phased projects that will take place through calendar year 2039. And the design on those isn't finalized yet. So we don't know the exact cost, but ultimately, when it's all said and done, that's going to represent approximately $2 to $4 billion investment in traffic mobility and safety for our communities. So as I mentioned, it's not just the Spaghetti Bowl itself that we're improving, but it's actually 12 miles of the metro interstate. So that includes, for example, Interstate 80 near the Nugget in Sparks. That includes 580 south of the Spaghetti Bowl as well, as you can see portrayed in this map. And what you're seeing specifically on this map is the different phases that I mentioned of the project. So the first phase, starting this year, and I'll detail that in the next slide, that is actually from I-80 eastbound to southbound 580, and a little bit south of there. Phase 2 will then jump over to that section of I-80 that I mentioned in Sparks by the Nugget. Phase 3 will actually be US 395 north of the Spaghetti Bowl. And then subsequent to that, we'll hop down and improve 580 south of essentially Plum Lane, and then finally go back on I-80 kind of through the downtown core. So just it's important to understand that that is a phase sequence of improvements that will really be critical to keeping our ever-growing community connected and safe. And the first phase that I mentioned, we actually call that phase Spaghetti Bowl Express. We're beginning that project this year. And so what that phase of our overall Spaghetti Bowl improvements will do is, first and foremost, it will widen the Interstate I-80 eastbound to I-580 southbound Spaghetti Bowl ramp. So that, as you probably can envision, is the I-80, coming on I-80 from downtown, turning towards South Reno. That Spaghetti Bowl ramp, as we all know, narrows to one lane at the top of that ramp. We're going to widen it so that entire ramp is 2 lanes. And we're also going to do a lot of access management and improvements on the ramps themselves. So as you can see here on the slide, we're going to reconfigure the eastbound I-80 Wells Avenue exit ramp. We're going to also add some additional lanes and reconfigure some lanes to improve access and merging on southbound 580, just south of the Spaghetti Bowl. That area, the exit ramps are actually very closely spaced together. You find that that brings a lot of weaving, across the interstate lanes as people come to and from those exits. And once again, going back to the growth that I talked about in our community, that was fine when it was first constructed in the late 60s and early 70s. Since then, our community has grown. So there's really a need to reconstruct some of those interchanges as well. And the first step that we're actually going to take in the project, which everyone will see beginning about mid-August, so next month, is we are going to repave portions of, or replace portions of the concrete pavement on I-580 northbound. So from I-580 northbound, north of, pretty much north of Moana, all the way to Mill Street, we're going to, in sections of there, rehab and replace a lot of that concrete, which in itself is aging. And then, as you can see here, the other construction elements that I talked about will ramp up in early next year. And for more information, you guys can go to ndotspaghettibowl.com. But what I'd like to do first is see if this will play for you so that you can kind of see a video illustration of what this first phase of Spaghetti Bowl will look like.
The Reno-Spaghetti Bowl Express project aims to improve traffic flow on I-580 between Villanova Drive and I-80. Centralized with loop ramp improvements at 2nd Street. Heading southbound on I-580, currently 3 lanes merge into 2, causing backups. The Spaghetti Bowl Express project will improve flow by keeping 3 lanes over I-80. Looking at the I-80 eastbound off-ramp, the revised eastbound exits to 395-580 will be restriped to use 2 freeway lanes to deliver traffic to this exit. That ramp will then enter southbound I-580 with 2 lanes instead of tapering into 1. Southbound traffic on I-580 now offers a 2-lane exit to 2nd Street. Immediately following is the new Mill Street exit. Mill Street traffic exits while 2nd Street traffic enters I-580 via a new braided ramp. Improvements continue to the Villanova Drive exit. Additional allows for better traffic flow for I-580 southbound. The Reno-Spaghetti Bowl Express project aims to improve.
So I hope that all of us in the conference were able to hear that narration, but if not, you're probably able to also see from that video what some of those improvements were. Another major project that we've launched this summer is the very first step in future widening of 395 into the North Valleys. Once again, another very fast-growing area of our region. And so what we've done, as many of you have probably seen if you've been in North Reno or headed to and from the North Valleys, is last month we removed the 395 Par-Dandini Bridge. And what we're doing is we're widening that bridge. It's an older bridge, it's almost 50 years old, so it needed replacement. But I think the most exciting thing about what you're seeing out there right now is that is the first step in what will be future widening of 395 to and from the North Valleys. So as you see, phase 1A, we're replacing the Par Bridge right now as we speak. And you will see, if you head that direction, at the end of the month, there will also be some more freeway detours at the last weekend of this month in that area as we move some of the bridge girders into place. So just be aware of that if you commute in that area. And then we'll move on to, in future years, the next phase, which will be widening southbound 395 between Golden Valley and North McCarran. And then in subsequent years, this would be beginning in 2026, widening southbound 395 from Golden Valley Road to Stead Boulevard. Once again, really in an effort to keep everyone mobile and safe. And then also, Mark mentioned our planning processes for providing more multimodal opportunities to and from the Tri-Center USA Parkway east of Sparks. And I did want to kind of illustrate how some of those traffic counts have increased, as you can see there. So for example, on I-80 near Mustang, which is just east of Sparks, in 2009, there were 27,000 vehicles that traveled that stretch every year. 2 years ago, that jumped to 44,000, and you can see similar jumps in counts on USA Parkway itself. So there's a lot that we've done in the near term as well as far as roadway improvements. As you can see listed there, a lot of it has to do with managing access to and from some of the roadways off of USA Parkway, such as Electric Avenue, and also widening some of the ramps and extending some of the ramps between Interstate 80 and the USA Parkway, so that there is better capacity there for, especially for those huge commute hour traffic counts that we see. So I did want to reference that as Mark and our planning group collaboratively with the community is working on improvements to provide more multimodal opportunity there, we're also improving a lot of the infrastructure there. And we are actually going to be early next year embarking on environmental review of the potential of future widening of I-80 from East Sparks to the Tri-Center, the USA Parkway. And I want to wrap it up with just mentioning some of our other projects that you've probably already seen this summer. The first one is roadway safety improvements to McCarran, Greg to Probasco in Sparks, kind of by the Sparks Marina, essentially. And what we're doing on that section of McCarran is making a lot of safety improvements. We have installed a fence in the median of McCarran on some of those sections of roadway, because we unfortunately saw that there were a lot of pedestrians crossing, illegally crossing, jaywalking in that section of road. And so what that median does is it prevents the jaywalking, but also provides some of the already in place crosswalks there that they can get to and from the residential areas to the more commercial areas that are on both sides of McCarran there. And on a separate section of McCarran, we're repaving from West 4th Street to South Virginia, the Collin Ranch area, essentially. So if you live in that area, you've probably already seen the overnight lane closures as we embark on that paving. And that paving will actually continue through next summer. So you'll continue to see overnight lane closures on that section of McCarran as well. Next week, we are completing our widening of US 50 in the Silver Springs area east of Carson City. Incrementally, over the last decade and a half, we have widened that section of US 50, and this is actually kind of the last phase that will widen what used to be a 2-lane highway into a divided 4-lane highway near Silver Springs. And also, once again, for those in the North Valley, we're installing wind warning signs. That's another really wind-prone area. And we do find that as there are vehicles, trucks, delivery vehicles going to and from some of the developments in the North Valleys, they can unfortunately be prone to being blown over by those really strong gusts of wind that we can get. So that wind warning sign will just provide another visual cue for drivers if there is heavy wind on in the North Valley, so that they can plan their route accordingly, maybe detour or reschedule. And we're also updating some of the advanced signal warning systems across the valley. You'll see that coming beginning this fall to some of the traffic signals, such as the traffic signals on Pyramid Highway and Mount Rose. I also want to mention the one change that you probably have seen that we implemented and finished this spring, which is that we changed all of the exit numbers on I-580 from Carson City to the Reno Spaghetti Bowl. So if you've noticed that, what that means in this picture is you can see in the center right, there's a, what looks to be exit 66. Those numbers, those exit signs have all changed. And the reason that is federal guidelines mandate that interstate corridors, exit numbers on interstate corridors correlate with interstate mileage. And now that I-580 is completely built out all the way to Carson City and is no longer a primary designation of 395, we're renaming or renumbering those exits to correlate with the interstate exits. So if you saw that and wondering what that's about, that's what it is. I have a list here as well, so you can kind of see that there were 23 exit numbers that ended up being changed. Obviously, the exits themselves remain the same, the roadways named the same, it's just the exit numbers. So I wanted to recap that, and I know we'll have a Q&A at the end, but also feel free to reach out to me personally. My contact information is here, and I'll share that for just a moment before we turn it over to Dan.
All right, I guess that's my cue. Thank you, Meg and Mark. Give me just a moment while I share my screen here. So thanks again for this opportunity to present. It's very timely for us at the RTC because we are in the process of updating our long-range transportation plan, which we call the Regional Transportation Plan, or RTP for short. And this basically, we're an MPO, which is a Metropolitan Planning Organization. And I know probably a lot of you are familiar with some of the things that RTC does in terms of our street and highway improvement projects and running the transit system. But on the planning side of things, we have access to federal funding as this MPO designation. Any urbanized area that's over 50,000 people can form an MPO. And so we have a lot of the same requirements that NDOT does, just more focused on a regional level. So as I mentioned, we are in the process of updating our long-range plan. We're looking at a 2050 horizon year. We have to update this plan every 4 years, and it has to be a minimum of 20-year planning horizon. We're currently living under our 2040 RTP, which was adopted back in May of 2017. So our hope is to have this new document completed and approved by the spring of 2021. And we're really in a point right now where we're going out to the public and also our stakeholder agencies, working very closely with NDOT in collaboration with them, making sure you know, the projects in their long-range plan and their prioritization aligns with us in our projects. This plan that we're developing has to be what's called fiscally constrained, meaning we have to have revenues that are reasonably expected to be available to implement these projects over this, you know, 20+ timeline. We have a survey open right now, and I do have a slide toward the end of my presentation that's got the information there. That'll be open through July 20th. And really this is kind of a fun interactive survey. We're trying to get the public engaged into actually identifying specific projects. You can go on there and you can map very specific locations. We're looking for project ideas for all modes of transportation, not necessarily just roadway improvements, but maybe it's a bicycle facility, or you want to park and ride by you think there's a good location for a park and ride, if you want to use transit somewhere. So we basically tell people no ideas are bad. It's just a matter of once we get all of those, we'll have to go through and see kind of what's feasible within the revenues that we expect to have. Also, you can contact staff directly. Everyone here at RTC is very accessible, and at the end of my presentation, I have my contact information as well as some of my colleagues. I'm sure you can reach out to Patrick too, and he can forward along my information. So this is just a quick highlight of what we've done since our last RTP adoption, our 2040, which was in 2017, as I mentioned. We're very proud of a lot of these accomplishments. We got the Southeast Connector open, our Veterans Parkway running up to Sparks Boulevard up there. We opened up our bus rapid transit line on 4th Street and Prater Way, so it's provides a solid connection with limited stops between downtown Reno and downtown Sparks. We improved the Pyramid Highway McCarran intersection. This was very much in collaboration with NDOT. They are the owner-operator of both of those roads. And so it was a successful partnership. We've really seen traffic operations improve at that intersection. And of course, we're working on Virginia Street currently. I'm sure most of you are familiar with that. And we're really looking to expand the bus rapid transit on that street up to the university to provide that quicker, more directly connected way to get from the university area down into Midtown. And speaking of transit, we are pushing forward our electric bus program, and we're actually going to be exploring liquid hydrogen as well. So the point or the goal of the RTC is to become run a complete fleet off of alternative fuel sources by 2040. So we're well on our way there. I don't have the exact numbers right in front of me, but I would say about between a quarter and a third of our fleet is already fully electric, zero emission buses. We're looking into different types of service as well, realizing that we can't always commit to providing fixed route in some of our more ex-urban areas. There's a lot of development happening, for example, up in the North Valleys, in Spanish Springs. And so, it's not really financially feasible for us to run a fixed route bus up there. But what we're finding is we've started a new program called the Flex Ride, which is, you can see on the screen there, it's kind of like a smaller type paratransit type bus. And it works basically like you would if you were going to reserve a ride on Uber or Lyft. You can basically dial it up on your phone and it'll be there within 15 minutes top. It has curbside to curbside delivery within a defined zone. And we make sure that we run these flex ride buses to kind of connect on our more high frequency fixed route. And we also have a very successful van pool program, which it's just been growing exponentially, largely fueled by all the new employment opportunities in the Tri-Center out there, which Meg and Mark alluded to earlier. We've been able to establish these van pools, which I believe are a minimum of 6 passengers, and which has greatly reduced, the number of vehicle trips on I-80. I mean, it's still, congestion is still an issue, and we are working closely with NDOT to resolve that. But in the meantime, we made a pretty good dent in eliminating some of those additional trips on the roads by offering these other alternatives. So where do we get our projects that we want to put in our plan, and where do we pursue them? As I mentioned, we have a survey. We're going out to the community and our stakeholders. So a lot of ideas, good ideas, come from people in the public. As I mentioned, we also update our plan every 4 years. So a lot of, that's a requirement. We're required to do that by the federal government, by Federal Highway Administration. So a lot of those projects, obviously, that are in those out years kind of roll over and get moved forward the closer we are to completing some of the more short-term projects. And in the interim, we do, in the planning department here, we do a lot of area and corridor studies as well. Some that we recently completed are the South Meadows multimodal transportation study and a similar study for the university area, largely focusing on that gateway between, as approaching the university and downtown Reno. We've updated our ADA transition plan, and this basically addresses accessibility obstacles and that sort of thing for not only sidewalks, but we're also looking at our transit stops, even our own buildings here at RTC's offices. We're working on a human services transportation plan, and this looks how we can partner with other service providers, say like specific nonprofits that provide trips to medical appointments, that sort of thing, for people that rely on them. And so we're just looking to run our services in tandem with theirs, maybe more effectively, and kind of eliminate any duplications. We're looking at an advanced mobility study right now. We have an RFP that's about to hit the street. And we're wanting to better understand, how prepared our region is for some of these, newer technologies like automated, connected, and autonomous vehicles, down to, what's it look like if we're going to get a bunch of electric scooters riding downtown and that sort of thing. So really just looking at our preparedness and our landscape for that. And then last but not least, as we are partnering with NDOT on a couple of planning studies. One is already underway, I believe. It's on looking at Mount Rose Highway, that corridor basically between Virginia Street up to, I don't remember the exact project limits, but essentially before it transitions up to the more rural road as you go up to Mount Rose. And also looking at one that would evaluate the entire McCarran Boulevard loop. There's a lot of different development patterns that have happened over the years. And, initially this loop road was meant, envisioned to kind of move traffic, kind of bypass some of the more local arterials. But as development patterns have changed over the years, it's kind of changed the character of some of that. So we're trying to take a step back and reassess, really what is the vision for McCarran Boulevard and how might that best facilitate the movement of people and goods. So some projects real quickly that we have currently underway. We're looking at some multimodal improvements on Sun Valley Boulevard. Right now there's a serious lack of sidewalks and more pedestrian and bicycle facilities out there, but there's a lot of people that walk out there, and there's a lot of, that's some of our highest transit ridership is out there as well. So we're looking to see, also working with NDOT, because they own part of that road as well, how we can improve some of that pedestrian access. We're looking at the city of Reno for their first cycle track. We're currently under development design considerations for what would be a two-way cycle track. So this is something that's, buffered from vehicle traffic and kind of gives cyclists their own kind of space. And this would run from basically Midtown up to the university as well. And we're also installing a similar kind of raised off-street path on Oddie Boulevard and Wells Avenue, and looking at similar pedestrian improvements there. So as I mentioned, this is just a quick snapshot of all the different types of projects that are our current RTP. And so we'll be reevaluating those for consideration of inclusion in our updated plan. We did, as I mentioned, have a kind of a study that focused on the South Meadows area. And so here, just a handful of some project suggestions that came out of there, as well as some additional ones that were offered up in the meantime. And I apologize for running through these a little quickly, but I realize we are getting short on time. So like I said, anyone can reach out to me for more information, and a lot of this stuff is on the RTC website. And so again, here is looking at kind of that gateway area in the university and some of the project suggestions that have come out of there. And then we've got a lot from the development community are concepts we've heard that would be considered for inclusion into our updated long-range plan, and really looking at how to make the North Valleys a little better connected and improve some of that traffic circulation up there. We've already put a lot of investment already up there. You can see the yellow are in design, and the blue is already what's planned, and the red are projects that are on the ground that we've implemented in just the last couple of years. Getting back to the Tri-Center, you know, one of the things NDOT's looking at is perhaps widening I-80 to improve traffic flow there. We've also heard from kind of our economic development partners, as well as other developers, looking at other potential routes to get people out to the Tri-Center as well. The one on the north would come off of La Posada. I know the city of Sparks is currently evaluating different alignments, you know, connecting to their more industrial center, and then looking at how that might be expanded out to the Tri-Center. And then we've heard from the development community, there's some property owners kind of east of South Meadows there where that ends, and they're looking at accessibility to their own land holdings, but also how that might be extended out to the Tri-Center. So again, these are all concepts we've heard. Nothing's in our plan yet to date that we're developing. We will go through a whole process of, you know, doing a prioritization and looking at different components in terms of like congestion reduction, safety, pavement condition. All these things kind of get considered when looking at some of these potential improvements to put in our plan. We are looking to update a short-range transit plan, which will kind of guide how we expand or improve upon our existing transit services over the next couple of years. And we've had some requests for expanding our BRT routes clear down to the Summit area. There's a lot of new development happening there with, you know, some of the more affordable housing projects that are going on. Obviously, that area continues to grow all around. A lot of new apartment complexes and multifamilies is really popping down there. And then looking to expand our success with 4th Street a little bit further to the west. I already touched on FlexRide real quick. These are just a couple other areas that we're considering implementing that. And also looking at improving some of our transit facilities. So quickly, there is the link to the survey, and I can send that out to Patrick after this meeting. Maybe he can help me circulate that. And then these are just some of the organization, you know, kind of at the director leadership level at RTC. So that concludes my presentation, and I apologize if I went too long there, but definitely want to keep some time for questions.
Well, hey, thank you so much, Dan, and thank you, Meg, and also Mark. We really appreciate it. Are there any questions? We didn't see any come through the chat during the conversation, but if anybody has a question, feel free to write it in the chat and unmute yourself on your controls. Let us know if you have a question. Give that just a second. All right. Well, one of the questions I know that I kind of thought of during you guys' presentation, with the pandemic, obviously, maybe people being less on the roads, I was curious if you guys thought that had cleared up some time for you guys to maybe get some projects going, or if you guys have projects so far out that even a pandemic doesn't really change it.
That's a good question. And it's a little bit of both, actually. So for us at NDOT, you're absolutely correct that as we all saw, there was less traffic, especially during the start of the pandemic. And we continue to, on a daily basis, evaluate some of the key traffic counter stations that we have across the region. But in general, I can say that when you look at mid to late March, in some areas we were down, traffic was decreased by half, if not more. We are definitely seeing that return, where in general, we're almost where we were last year. We might be 10, 15% less than the traffic last year at the same time, depending on the station that you're looking at. So yes, we did see a decrease. Luckily, that is increasing now as more people hopefully safely get out and about. And at NDOT, and I don't know, I'm sure the same for the RTC, but at NDOT, we did take advantage of that time that you mentioned, Patrick, where there wasn't as much traffic. So specifically, we did a lot of maintenance projects that we might not have otherwise been able to do on a weekday during the day, for example. There was some guardrail repair near the Spaghetti Bowl. There were some drainage and roadway shoulder improvements on I-80 East of Sparks that we wanted to make. And with reduced traffic, we were able to do that and get those out of the way where it didn't have quite the same impact on traffic that it would have otherwise during normal traffic counts.
Yeah, I would just echo that. If there is a silver lining to all this, we were really able to push out some projects that we were under construction and actually got way ahead of schedule, which was great, saved a lot of money. We're able to, particularly on Virginia Street with the Midtown businesses, a lot of them were shut down anyway. So they were really supportive of us getting in there and getting the work done so that when they could open back up, you know, that people would return to nice new traffic improvements there, and it'd be more of a welcoming environment and not impact business any more than it had already been impacted.
This is Mark. I want to chime in on my side too regarding the COVID-19. In a sense, it's increased and complicated the planning aspect, because this really highlighted where we need to have more contingency built into our plan to go ahead and deal with situations like this, and how do we react when there's emergencies of this nature in the future. Yeah, it's been quite a experience for us.
All right. Well, it looks like we have somebody who had a question. Paul Sherman. I don't know if you can hear me, Paul, but
I can.
About the light rail.
Yeah, I was wondering, because we're talking about short-term and longer-term planning. I've been hearing for years about light rail, but I never hear anything specific. Is there any plans at all, or is it a concept?
Oh, Dan, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, no, that's a great question. And, you know, depending on where exactly you're looking at it, we've found with kind of in our core, it doesn't really pencil out because we don't really have the density or projected ridership to support something like that. What we have been finding, though, is that our bus rapid transit, our BRT routes, have been highly successful because they kind of operate more like light rail than a typical transit bus. So they're able to have those more shorter frequencies and headways and move a lot more people more efficiently. And then with the flex ride service that we've been implementing, that's really been helping to kind of pull people in from the outside that we likely wouldn't have been able to serve with light rail or another mode as well.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question.
Go.
This is Mark. I wanted to interject something too. I mentioned in my presentation about the FAST Act that extended the designation of future I-11 on up to I-80, but I didn't mention what the FAST Act was. Wanted to go ahead and explain that. It's a congressional act called Fixing America's Surface Transportation, which is very important, and it includes funding and a variety of other considerations that we have to include for planning factors. And we're looking at, having that extended by Congress too, or maybe under a different name. But I wanted to go ahead and explain what the FAST Act was.
Excellent. Well, I don't see any other questions coming through, and in the interest of everybody's time, what we'll do is we're going to send an email to everybody after this, and I'll include all of the contact info for our speakers. We also have a recording of it as well, so if you need to watch this again or reference it for any of your guys' clients, we'd be more than happy to share it with you. And thank you again to all of our speakers today, Mark, Meg, and Dan. We really appreciate having you guys. Thank you, the RTC. You guys are an integral part of our community. So thank you guys for all you do, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Patrick. Appreciate the
You're
opportunity.
welcome.
Of course. All right,
Thank you.
everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Our next class is going to be in September, so watch out for that. And we look forward to seeing you guys then. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.